biggest set of welfare reforms since the introduction of universal credit over a decade ago have been announced, and they target the so-called shakers, those people who can work but instead choose to live off the taxpayers. Do you agree with this? Is it the right approach, and is it targeting the right people? And who needs James Cleverly and David Cameron when we've got Suella? She's been out again. She's issued a 5-point plan showing exactly what she thinks Sunak needs to do to get flights heading off to Rwanda. Is she right? Is this a help to Sunak or a hindrance, you tell me? And is it time to revalue properties for council tax? Of course, the valuations often used now are decades old. And new police guidance has been issued. And what do you think it's all about? The fact, perhaps, that you can actually arrest people stomping all over war memorials? Or maybe that, I don't know, it might not be the best idea to have two-tier policing, etc., etc.? Don't be ridiculous. No, of course not. It's about which words to use in order to avoid causing offence. Give me strength. Yes, indeed. We'll be getting stuck into all of that. Of course, it's Friday, Dewberry Tavern opens, and tonight joining the panel, I've got a new face. We like those, don't we? But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's latest news headlines.
It is 1 minute past 6. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Good evening to you. The Chancellor is considering cutting inheritance and business tax in an effort to win over Tory MPs with his autumn statement. Jeremy Hunt had said tax cuts this year would be virtually impossible. Now, after a recent fall in inflation, he says it all depends on how much the economy's growing.
The best way that we can reduce the tax burden for everyone is to grow the economy. There's no shortcut. If we grow the economy, if we support manufacturing businesses like the one I'm visiting today in Sheffield, that means that we have more money to reduce the tax burden, but also to invest in public services like the NHS. So we will always take a balanced approach about putting the economy.
And the Chancellor's announced £4.5 billion in investment for British manufacturing as he attempts to boost sluggish growth rates in the UK. Car makers, aerospace companies and clean energy firms will benefit from the funding, which will cover a 5-year period and become available in 2025, after the next general election.
Manufacturing is one of our great secrets. We actually overtook France to become the 8th largest manufacturer in the world. And as you can see from factories like this, we do world-beating stuff in the UK. This factory here has just exported an electrolyser to Japan, which is the first one that's ever been imported into Japan. And we want to support our manufacturing industry because it creates jobs all around the UK. It raises our productivity, and that's the way that we can raise people's wages and people's real incomes.
The Prime Minister says he's determined to press on with his plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite the government's defeat in the Supreme Court and opposition.
Will the Prime Minister rescue the Rwanda plan, Mrs Bradford?
It's after the former Home Secretary said his attempts will fail unless he opts out of the European Convention on Human Rights. Suella Braverman, sacked this week, says the proposed new treaty and legislation are simply a tweaked version of a failed Plan A. The Labour leader is refusing to back calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, claiming his party remains united despite this week's rebellion. On a visit to a gas terminal in Aberdeen, Sir Keir Starmer indicated his position proves he's the right person to be the next Prime Minister. However, GBNews understands there's concern within the party of a growing rift between Sir Keir Starmer and the Scottish Labour leader. Anna Sarwar's MSPs look likely to back an amendment in Holyrood next week, calling for a ceasefire. The Labour leader says his focus is on the release of hostages and the plight of civilians.
Alleviating the suffering and a two-state solution and making sure we get there. There is complete unity in the Labour Party. Hostages are being held as we have this conversation, as people are dying in Gaza as we have this conversation. I'm sure you'll understand that my focus is on how we alleviate that situation, not questions of Labour Party management.
Two 12-year-old boys have been remanded in custody at Birmingham Magistrates Court, charged with murder and possessing a machete. They're accused of killing 19-year-old Sean C. Sahai, who was attacked in Wolverhampton on Monday night and died at the scene. They'll appear in court again on Monday. The man who murdered a schoolteacher in Ireland has been jailed for life. 23-year-old Aisling Murphy was killed while exercising on a canal path in Tullamore in January last year. 33-year-old Joseph Puska had denied the murder but was convicted by a jury last week. Outside court, police, who described the case as a monstrous crime, praised the victim's family for their courage and dignity during the trial. £8.3 billion has been promised to fix what the Prime Minister has described as the scourge of potholes. The funding for road maintenance in England will be available to local authorities over the next decade. The money, the government says, was saved by scrapping the HS2 rail line north of Birmingham. And Everton have had 10 points deducted for breaching the Premier League's financial fair play rules. An independent commission found Everton's losses during the 21-22 season amounted to £124.5 million. That's almost 20 million more than the allowed limit. The penalty leaves them on 4 points and in the relegation zone. The club says it will appeal the decision. Well, this is GB News, live across the UK on TV, digital radio and on your smart speaker too. That's it from me for the moment. Now it's over to Michelle.
Thanks for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, we've got a new face. We do like those, don't we? Lord Bailey, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, joins me. It's a good job you weren't here last night because we was getting stuck into the House of Lords. But you've avoided that one, which is probably for the best. That House of Lords is not on the agenda for tonight. Alongside him as well, my Friday regular, can't get rid of him. Anything for a free pan is our Paul Embry, trade unionist. Writer,
There's the badge, trade
a bit
union
of everything,
badge.
firefighter,
Yeah.
proud Labour man.
Jack of all trades. There's no beginning to my talents,
Yeah.
as someone once said.
That's not what we think. Yes, it is Friday. One of my viewers already, Simon, has been in touch saying, Michelle, how much do you charge for a Stella in the Dewberry Tavern? Money can't buy drinks with me on a Friday night, I'm afraid, Steve. It is invite only. So, yes, no, you can't. And who's Steve anyway? It was Simon that's just asked me that. Anyway, you know the drill. You can get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you get hold of me, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Lots I want to get into with you guys tonight. Your council tax. Do you think it's time for properties to be revalued so that it is perhaps a fairer system? Bigger houses start paying a lot more. Would you be in favour of that? Get in touch and tell me. And I'll have the latest police guidance as well. Is it going to be something that's going to make us all safer? I'll give you the answer to that before the end of the programme. But, of course, tonight's top story, Suella Braverman. I mean, I don't know if any of you have noticed how many people actually looked at her letter, her resignation letter on Twitter. Tens of millions of people read her letter, so they did. So she indeed, I don't know what it is about the Suella effect, but she is a very popular individual at the moment. When she speaks, people are downing tools and listening. And she has been speaking out again today because she has issued a 5-point plan. It's all about what to do now. Of course, we know the Supreme Court stopped the flights basically taking off. Before we get into the debate, just take a second to remind ourselves of what the 5 points were, shall we? This is her plan. So you will remember that actually one of the concerns that they had was not necessarily about whether or not you can send people over to Rwanda. It was about whether or not Rwanda was a safe country and they wouldn't basically send people back to the origin, the country of origin. So what she wants to do is she wants this new bill of Sunak's to address the Supreme Court's concerns. Read that. She wants to make sure that flights are indeed happening before the next general election. She thinks that swift removal should indeed mean swift removal, that those arriving here illegally must be detained, and she highlights that this must be treated as an emergency. What she would like to happen is that Parliament should perhaps be recalled and maybe spend your Christmas holiday, your breaks, debating this. What do you think to those 5 points? I'll start with you. Is this the answer?
It's an answer, and I think it shows a difference in leadership style, isn't it? So Rishi's decided he wants to go through Parliament, have that conversation, you know, and give Parliament its primacy, where Suella said, bugger that isn't working, I'm going to take back the power. I think the interesting thing about doing this, though, we're not the only country in Europe struggling with immigration, and I wonder if we were to leave the ECH, would other countries follow? Because Germany are having a problem, Spain are, and certainly France are. And if they thought they could join us in leaving, it could create a bit of an avalanche of people coming out there. But again, I think this is a difference in tactic. Technically, it would work. Politically, it looks expensive.
Is Suella a help or a hindrance to Sunak?
Oh, there's no doubt in anybody's mind she's a hindrance. She has not written that resignation letter thinking, how can I help Rishi? She's thought, I'm going to get my boot stuck in Rishi's head, and that's exactly what she's doing.
So you don't think she's sitting there going, how can I help the great nation and help them with their migrant crises?
Helping the great nation and helping Rishi Sunak are two separate affairs, and she definitely has not decided to help Rishi. Listen, you have to assume she's written that letter and given these 5 steps out of a willingness to help. If you agree or not, you probably could assume that.
Paul? Oh, by the way, I must say, just in case, you're used to doing nighttime shows. On Dewbs, we don't use B words at tea time. So if anyone did hear that, slip of the tongue, we do apologise. Anyway, Paul, go.
I mean, how can you legislate for a country to be safe, which is what the government is planning to do, apparently? How can you say this country, even though the Supreme Court has found on the facts that a country is unsafe for all of the reasons that it set out, a government enacts a law saying, no, the law says now that that country is safe, so we can use Rwanda as an asylum application centre as a third country. That's the first thing that strikes me as absolutely bizarre. I've never seen anything like that before. But it's our courts, and one thing that has got lost in this debate, it's our courts that have made this decision. All of this talk about, blocking off the European Human Rights Convention and so on, it's our courts that have made the decision, and it's because the other laws were broken, other international agreements were broken, and the Supreme Court was quite clear about that. So I just think there's a hell of a lot of debate about the interference of other courts, European courts and so on, that I think is misplaced. And the thing is, as well, it lets politicians off the hook. That's the thing. It's politicians who are responsible for the fact that our asylum system is an absolute mess. It's broken, and it's been in that state now for several years. And I think there's a danger of all of the narrative about, the busybody courts and lawfare and activist lawyers and so on. It gets government off the hook. It gets the politicians off the hook when they're the ones who are responsible. For the fact that the boats are continually coming there after 2 or 3 years.
It does and it doesn't. So let's be clear. Suella Braverman, you could argue, she certainly would, she tried to do something, and it was activists who frustrated that process with the whole Rwanda.
She should have stood down then, Sean. The thing is, if it were true that, and she seems to be making this case, if it were true that the Prime Minister and other colleagues within government and do-good lawyers and so on were stopping her as an elected politician appointed as the Home Secretary from fulfilling the mandate that they were given by the British people, then in my view she should have stood down on a point of principle.
I couldn't disagree more. Why should she stand down because somebody else has interfered in the process? That's the complete opposite of the situation. You should stand down.
Sean,
the point I was
she's
trying
not
to
able
make,
to do the job that she was appointed to do. So as a point of principle, she should have stood down.
Hang on, don't talk over because no one can hear
I'm not here
anything.
to defend Suella Braverman, but the fact that someone acts against her isn't about her ability to do the job. That's about the rules that she and they have to play by. And let's be clear, when you say they can't change the law to make a place safe, safety is a matter of opinion. And I say that because the European Union say that Rwanda is safe. We and other European countries for many years now have funded a scheme that can remove refugees from other places to Rwanda. So the European countries, of which we are one, seem to think it's safe. Now, if our courts don't think it's safe, it's a other thing. But it would suggest to a bystander that safety is a matter of opinion. And the other piece to say as well, there's a lot of people in the black community, particularly Africans, who are furious at the way Rwanda is being spoken about. And they're saying, would a white majority country be spoken about in the same way that Rwanda is being spoken about? So there's other delicacies here.
And do you think it would be?
No, I absolutely do not think it would. But let's be clear, as complicated histories go, Rwanda definitely has that. But of course, Rwanda has recovered quite wonderfully, actually, and in quite a short amount of time. But the point is, if you have a set of rules that we all stick by and they say you can't do that, then you can't. But that isn't Suella Braverman's fault. It's not even the Prime Minister's fault, but it is both of their job to fix that system, because where you're absolutely right, our immigration system is ridiculous.
Let me mention Labour. If I can bring it on screen, I will. But the Tories have gone on an attack ad campaign basically saying that Labour back the smugglers. So they're basically saying, there you go, that's the open door. So if you're listening and not watching, they're basically the Labour Party backing British smugglers, basically, over British people. Big, massive open door with Keir Starmer stood behind it and a massive welcome sign looking out onto the cliffs of Dover, I think it is there. Is that what Labour are doing? Are you guys prioritising smugglers and all the rest of it?
No, I mean, that's crass. That's just, you know, party political point scoring. Of course, Starmer and Labour don't support smugglers, but they are people who are in favour of a liberal immigration policy. There's no question about that.
What does that mean?
Well, it means they want a relaxed approach to immigration. There are many people on the left, and I speak from experience, who are supportive of the open borders position.
Are you one of them?
No, I'm certainly not one of them. I subscribe to the traditional Labour view from many years ago that control of the labour supply is really important, because the labour supply is a market dynamic which, like all market dynamics, needs to be regulated. So as to allow the government to plan around welfare and housing and employment and that sort of thing. And, you know, about 20 or 30 years ago, that was actually the mainstream position on the left. And the position of open borders was one that was largely held by, if you like, Trotskyists and anarchists. Now that fringe position has moved centre stage on the left and has become mainstream. And people like myself who argue for strong border control are looked upon as, you know, extremists and cranks within the Labour Party. And I don't think there's any surprise. There's a correlation between the change in that dynamic, if you like, and the fact that Labour has gradually, over those years, hemorrhaged support among working class people, because it is an issue in working class communities, not because of xenophobia or bigotry, but because working class communities suffer the effects of mass immigration, you know, where it's uncontrolled, in a way that, you know, the middle class can buy themselves out of. And that's why so many voters, I think, have turned against Labour in recent years.
You know, obviously you're a Tory, Sean. When you hear Lee Anderson, when you say hear Lee Anderson coming out and saying stuff like, you know what, just ignore the courts, do you support that?
No.
Is that a bit embarrassing for you?
No, it's not embarrassing. I tell you what, I'm quite proud of that, and I'll tell you why. Because any political party that's going to work for such a broad country needs to have a broad base, and Lee is entitled to his view. I mightn't agree all the time, but largely I do.
But he's pretty senior in the party. It's not like a random work experience.
Listen, you're a senior Tory the minute you're causing trouble. I've learned it in my time. If you toe the party line, you're not senior anymore. But look, Lee represents a view that many people, Tory and beyond, would agree to. Because as Paul has said, it is mass immigration that affects working class people. And one of the things you've seen in the south of this country is we've become very drunk on poor, low-quality, low-cost imported labour. And that's had a massive effect on working people in this country. So when Keir Starmer, when people say that Keir Starmer is in favour of an open borders policy and you show that poster, why it bites is because people have felt that in their wallets. That's the difference. And also, Keir Starmer has never really given his position. What I do admire on the left is when Labour members say they're in favour of an open border, because at least they're letting people know what they're dealing with. You need to tell it one way or the other. There
you go. What do you make to it all at home? Do you reckon Rishi Sunak is sitting at home thinking to himself, what do I do about this whole thing? Oh, thank goodness for that, Suella. She's given me a plan. Now I know what to do. Your thoughts on that? Also, listen, benefit clampdown targeting the so-called shirkers. Is that the right focus of attention? I'll see you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Down on my statement.
Hello everybody, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Welcome back alongside me. Sean Bailey, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Paul Embry, a trade unionist and writer. Lots of appreciation for you. So, yes, you can tell me at the end of the programme, is he allowed back or not? We do. We take my viewers' opinions very seriously.
Dewberry's got talent.
Yeah, Dewberry's got talent. Yeah, you do. I take it seriously what my viewers think. So if you do a good job, you might get allowed back. Let's talk benefits, shall we, everybody? Because the government is planning to clamp down on them, apparently. You know, there's a lot of conversation about this. This is all about what they're calling a back-to-work plan. And it's all about targeting the people, potentially as well those that have been off, very long-term sick. Some are asking, well, if people really are ill, are these changes going to affect them? This, of course, has got to be all signed off, but what it will basically mean is that if you refuse repeatedly to engage and decide that you actually don't want to work, then now tougher sanctions can come in at some points as well. If after 18 months, for example, you're still not working, well, they're going to get you onto work placements. In some cases, they will cut off the benefits. Do you think this is the right approach, Sean?
The broad thing for me is this. It is always right to clamp down on people abusing the benefit system, but it must be done in concert with clamping down on people who are not paying their tax.
Why?
There's people at the other end of the scale who earn big money. Let's just make sure they're paying their tax.
But why do you have to do them in tandem? Why can't
Because
you just...
it isn't fair to talk about people... do you remember back in the 90s when we had all this idea that people are scrounging off the benefit system and stealing people? Well, you've got people who are stealing what? I don't know, 63 quid a week, and you've got other people who owe the taxman £650 million.
This is true.
I feel like we need to concentrate on both. That's one thing. But the other thing to say, the biggest scandal in my mind in this country is that most of the people who are poor actually work. Right? And that, for me, I think is a massive scandal. So what I've always thought is you should not be able to earn more on benefits than you can in work. That is terrible. And the other reason I think that is because we have people who genuinely need those benefits. So if we're giving benefits to people who could support themselves, those people who genuinely need those benefits get less. So it is right for the government to make sure that our benefit spend is going to people who need it and not people who could work but decided not to work.
Paul?
Well, I think Sean's completely right, actually. I was going to offer you a Labour Party membership card there, Sean, because that's very sensible. Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to people being, you know, punitive action against people who can work but choose not to. But why do we never go for people at the top end of the scale? There are scroungers at both ends of the scale, if we're honest about it. And there is, as I've said on this show before, Michelle, there's enormous wealth and income inequality in this country. And some people at the top work very hard and deserve their just rewards. I'm not criticising those people. But there are some people who, frankly, don't, and some people who look to get out of tax, and some people who avoid paying tax, and big corporations who pay as little tax as possible. And I would like to see a bit of a focus from government on those people, as much as they always go for people at the bottom end. You know, as I say, I don't think people should get away with claiming benefits if they're fit and able to work and there's a job available to them. And that's a key thing. There has to be job availability. And it's the old saying that, you know, the welfare state should be a safety net and not a comfort blanket. So I'm not defending people who just want to sit idle when there is work to be done and when there is work available to them. But it does need to be a tandem approach, because otherwise people will think, look, what are the priorities of government? Why are they going for the little person over the big people the whole time?
It gives you the moral right to do that. I mean, look, the taxman would suggest he's always chasing people, and anybody who works for a living will feel like, well, the taxman's always, you know, he's always on my payslip. So we do chase people who should be paying. But sometimes you get a frenzy around the idea that people are on the scrounge and are on the benefits and all the rest of that. And, you know, I don't like that notion, because it means people are struggling, sometimes feel that they can't ask for help, that they don't want to be seen in that way. And I've been unemployed, I've been homeless, I know what that's like. And if someone's going to recover from that, they're going to need help. And as a nation, one of our proudest boasts is that we do help people who need help, but it then does mean if you're at home freewheeling, get off your bum.
Yeah, I'll check the figures. The richest 10% of households in the UK have got 50% of all the nation's wealth, and the poorest 50% of households have only got 9% of all the nation's wealth. And the top 1% of households has got 230 times more wealth than the bottom 10% of households. Now, that tells me that there is a massive disparity between rich and poor, between the haves and the have-nots in this country. We've got banks making record profits from the interest rate rises, making billions of pounds of profits at the expense of people and businesses who are struggling to pay their mortgages. We've got the energy companies who are making huge profits out of the increase in energy bills. I think there's scope there for a windfall tax that could help to redistribute wealth. I think there's scope
But that's the question, isn't it? Because now you've moved on to another thing. What's made this country safe is that people can be very financially successful. If you overly punish people for that, everybody feels it, and whatever happens financially, you can guarantee the poorest feel it earliest, longest and hardest. So there is a balance there, and the word redistribution, I think, can sometimes be terrifying. We need to figure out what that really means. Are you going, for instance, I'll give you another figure. We have a record level of people who are economically inactive. How many of us are really that ill? I'll give you another figure.
No, but you don't have to be ill to be economically inactive. You might have retired or whatever.
Yeah, but the point is, then somebody who works in a chip shop, let's say, I speak to the fellow who works in my local chippy all the time, he has paid...
I can see that.
he is paid...
He's breathing in as well.
But he is paid for my university education. So therefore, is that fair to keep taxing people in that way? And the other figure I'll give you, 1% of people pay 33% of income tax. So our system does ask rich people to pay.
But often, Sean, proportionately, as a proportion of their income, often don't pay a lot more than people at the bottom end of the scale. So in absolute terms,
they're sticking to the rules. They're paying by the rules, and if you work hard and you know, that's how you succeed, by outperforming that gap. We do have income disparity, serious income disparity in this country.
Huge.
But I think the real problem we have is twofold. One, to live a ordinary, fulfilling life in this country costs too much money. It just costs too much. And to buy an ordinary flat or house is ridiculous almost everywhere in the country. And I think if we could settle those two things, you know, then many more people would be happy.
And the other point is that actually huge disparities in wealth between rich and poor actually reduces economic performance. And there's an enormous amount of international data to show that you know, the wider the inequality, that's often accompanied by reduced economic performance. So it doesn't actually benefit
no matter what the
in
topic,
terms of
Paul,
prosperity.
No matter what the topic, I could bet my bottom dollar that on a Friday you will take whatever topic it is that we're discussing and turn it into the disparity between the rich and the poor. And
well,
that
someone
to me,
needs to.
But that to me is Labour's shtick, and it's Labour's answer to absolutely everything. Just take money off the rich.
Labour's shtick is even worse.
But the point is, Michelle, it's at the heart of so much that is wrong with our country and with our society. When you've got people at the top who are creaming it off, and you've got people at the bottom during a cost of living crisis that are struggling to make ends meet, and you've got a government that isn't focused on reducing that inequality and redistributing
that's
wealth,
not fair.
it's not good for economic performance. It's not good in terms of family life. It's not good in terms of local communities. It's not good in terms of work-life balance.
Yeah,
and so
all
on.
right, so we get the point. So what's not fair?
That's not fair. Look how much money the government spent on lockdown. We have the highest tax burden we've had for 70 years. I actually think one of the problems with Left, and Labour in particular, is their focus on public services, because what that is, that's you filling the pockets of your members. You know, it's easy to say, oh, let's do public services, but how efficient are these public services? Do we want them? Are they actually fulfilling the need that the public has? For instance, we constantly talk about nationalisation. The current obsession is nationalising the rail, right? But how terrible was British Rail? British Rail was horrific.
It was not as bad as it's not as bad as a privatised railway.
It's far worse.
Absolutely not as bad as a privatised railway. And the point is, the privatised railway system is being subsidised to a huge degree still by the taxpayer. We are still ploughing millions of pounds into subsidising what has become, in my view, and you know, the problems I had trying to get into the studio we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Michelle, didn't we? And then getting home again. You know, a dirty and unreliable, a disjointed and fragmented service. Now, British Rail was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
It was terrible.
But I think that privatisation has been an unmitigated disaster, not just in terms of the railway system, but the water system and other.
Let me just bring this train back on the track. Do you see what I did there?
Very good.
What I find weird about you, Sean, not just you as an individual, but the collective Tory kind of church, if you like. When we started this conversation, you said to me, you know, yes, we can do this kind of simplification clampdown or whatever on the. I'll just use the word shakers, and I don't mean to be rude about that term. Your answer to that was, well, then we should simultaneously be clamping down on the top. He then talked to me about, right, the government spent all this money helping people on lockdown and all of that. The government was absolutely rinsed during lockdown by many members that were very close to that government, if not members of that party. And I don't actually think that the Tories are doing enough at all to try and get those, I would probably argue, hundreds of millions of pounds back for us. So then when you say, well, we can do this on one side, but only if we're doing it, it's you guys that are in charge of doing the other, which is getting that money back. So why aren't you doing it?
You're completely right. And if it was up to me, I would get it back. The first thing, all of the fraud that went on under lockdown when we were paying people's salaries and also, I would get the money back. I'm...
Right, but then why isn't the Tory party prioritising that?
I don't know. All I can tell you, if I was in charge, if it was my Tory party, you can't make me responsible for the Prime Minister.
No, but you're a member of the party. You're a Tory like peer.
Defend your tribe.
No, but you have ins with this party. You're in the House of Lords. All of us lay people, we sit here and we agree with you, which is it's pretty damn disgraceful, actually, that all of this money was, I would argue, in some cases, perhaps even defrauded out of our system. Yeah. But then the people that can do something about it, which are the Tories, nobody seems to do anything about it. And then when I ask anyone about it, it's always, well, it's not my fault, it's someone else's. So why are the powers that be not doing it?
Well, I can't tell you that. I'm not the powers that be.
But don't you question them?
Of course I do. I sit here and question with you.
And what do they say to you?
They say to me that it's fine, and you
and what do you say?
You can see, I tell them it's not fine. Let's be very,
so then help my viewers understand this conversation. You say to them, what about this money? They say it's fine. You say it's not fine. Then what happens?
Nothing.
But that's not acceptable.
It isn't acceptable. You're asking me as if I had the executive power, I would have administered the money in a very different way. I wouldn't have given as much of it. I'd have taken much better control of it, and I certainly would have got back the money that I personally think has gone awry. I'd have got...
Are you making a bid for the leadership after the next election?
Well, listen, you never know.
He didn't rule it out, did
he? Don't say that if you're in the newspaper tomorrow.
There we go.
No, but my point is, I think it's a disgrace to the public to waste their money in any way. I would have tried to get it back.
Are the Tories taking it seriously enough, trying to recoup that money for the British taxpayer?
Yeah. I would say yeah.
Do you believe what you're saying?
Have they been successful? No.
Do you believe that they have got intent and that they are actually trying to proactively get this money back?
Yeah, because they don't have the money, then they can't spend it. The idea that the government would just let the money go, In fact, let me put it this way. They haven't tried hard enough. There's things that I would have probably tried. I would have tried to get that money back in tax. But the real problem was made in the way they distributed it in the first place. That's where the real mistake was made.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about things like these massive VIP lanes that I would argue many of them were abused, and I think it is an absolute disgrace. I completely agree with this whole, if somebody can physically work and chooses not to, I completely agree that we need to be tougher and all the rest of it. But I also completely agree with your primary point, your first point, which is we also have to go at the other end. But then I just cannot get my head around why people are allowing that not to happen. We're just trundling through life, battering people for the tenors that they might be shoving into their pockets while working cash in hand and all the rest of it, while simultaneously turning a blind eye to the hundreds of millions on the other side. Alison says, I am disabled. I've got many illnesses. And she says, I feel I am being put in the same category as all the shirkers. It's not fair on the genuinely sick people. Kevin says, whatever they do, the incentive must be to encourage worthy work, not sit on their backside. Kevin, my viewer, I'm going to push that back to you. What do you mean to encourage worthy work? Are you saying that if someone gets offered a job and they're on benefits and they say, actually, that's not a worthy position, would you be cool with them turning that down and waiting for a worthy so-called position? Who determines what a worthy position is? Should it be the case that you just have to take any job? Offer it back to you, Kevin, and anyone else has a view on that. Ian says, I can remember the days that if you signed on, they'd send you for 3 job interviews. If you were offered a job and you turned it down, your benefits were stopped. Simple as, he says. Darren says, I know people who go to job interviews with a bad attitude and looking scruffy with the aim of not being successful. Then, he says, they'll go back to their jobs advisor and say, well, I've tried. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't successful. Dave says, why are none of you mentioning the people on benefits who work cash in hand? Richard says, I blame this on the civil service, who basically don't know how to assess the applicants. And who is this one? I mean, lots of you are getting in touch. This one really has got you talking. But Lee says, Michelle, very important question. Have Sean and Paul done a buy one, get one free on their jackets tonight? I'll ask them in the break and I'll let you know once we come back. See you in 2.
The thing is,
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry on this lovely Friday night. Sean Bailey, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords. Although he did just tell me I'm not here to speak for the government. That is a fair point. And Paul Embry, a trade unionist and writer alongside me. Charlie says, excellent panel tonight, Michelle. Calm, proper, respectful debate from both sides. It is perfect to watch and to be able to hear reasoned arguments from both sides. There's a lot of love for the new face as well. Sean is great, says Chris, speaks a lot of sense. Probably wasted in the Lords. And by the way, my wife says he is very handsome.
I'll take that.
There you go.
Thank
if all
you.
else fails, Chris's wife thinks that you are very handsome. And by the way, Lee, I've cleared up the matter in the break. They don't have the same jacket on. They didn't do a buy one, get one free. They're very, very similar, but they're not the same. If you're listening, not watching, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So take it from me. They both look very dapper. Now, let's talk council tax, shall we? Because homeowners in Wales... You know, when we talk about council tax, and often we talk about mansion tax and bedroom tax and this tax and that tax anyway, there's now plans to increase council tax over in Wales on the most expensive properties, get this, by £1,000 a year. They're basically going to be revalued, and this will be the first time in 20 years that it has happened. Paul Embry, what do you make to this? Good idea or not?
I think it is a good idea. It's a good old-fashioned measure to redistribute wealth, isn't it? In Wales.
I'm going to have a bingo board.
What can be...
I'll have full house by about 6:15.
What can be wrong with that? I saw the figures. The top band in Wales, the average house, is worth 9 times more than the average home in the bottom band, but actually only attracts a charge of council tax of 3.5 times more than the lower band. So in that sense, I think it's a regressive tax. I'd get rid of council tax altogether, to be honest. I think it's out there. It's only introduced as an emergency measure.
Replace it with what?
I would like to see something like a local income tax-based or a service tax or something.
Do you remember the riots we had on the back of that suggestion?
No, absolutely not a poll tax. And the council tax came in, don't forget, in 1991, I think it was, directly as a result of the fact that Thatcher's council tax was so unpopular and was causing riots up and down the country, and was introduced as an emergency measure, as a sort of stopgap. And here we are 32 years later, and it's still here. And I don't think it's been a re-evaluation in England for 30 years in terms of the bans.
There's two things I'd say. Firstly, a lot of people now look back and wish we had the poll tax, because that was focused on individuals and might have been effective.
You're not going to make a case for the return to the poll tax.
No chance. I'm just telling you, it looks in some cases fairer than council tax. But here's the thing. In London, this would have a massive negative effect, because there's many households in London that have a house that is worth significantly more than their income. Because the house price rises in London have been ridiculous, it then meant if you swapped system and revalued, you'd punish a lot of people. So what I do like about this, because it's been done by the Welsh Assembly, as it were, the Welsh Government, they know what's going on in their region, and that's real devolved power, and they're collecting taxes in a way that works for them. If we had more devolved power, so the Scottish Assembly, London Assembly, to do this, it might look different, because in London this would be a very serious punishment, particularly to a lot of elderly people who've owned their home for a long time. The value of that home has risen steeply. They've now retired and simply wouldn't be able to take a big increase in. But
that is the thing. How do you literally physically pay that money if you have a fixed income, so like your pension? What would you do?
You'd have to leave the home.
You'd have to move.
The government would have to give relief, or you'd have to sell that home and downsize. But in London, this would look like a pretty severe punishment.
But I think that's all the more reason, is it not, to move away from the system in the first place, because there are these inequities in it. I mean, it is inherently unfair for some people. You know, as you say, there may be people on a low income but happen to have an expensive house.
Well, one of my viewers, John, he lives in Switzerland, and he's saying, here in Switzerland, everyone pays council tax based on their tax declaration. The richer you are, the more you contribute. He says even those on benefits have to make a tax declaration and could be made to pay, he says, even if it was only a penny. Really? Phil says, I don't mind if houses are re-evaluated, but what about when you've got 4 people living in the same household, all earning a wage, all using basically a lot more of the local services? That's your point, what you're then saying about it being on an individual rather than a home, because what Phil's suggesting is how about perhaps everybody on a wage should pay the council tax. Richard said, no change needed whatsoever. You get the same services, whatever the size of your house. He says it's only politics of envy, which is the reason to change that. Again, Carol, she says, again, we all get in the same service, so why does anyone have to pay more based on the property size?
The other thing to remember as well, poll tax is in the wider region of how much tax you pay anyway, because we pay significant amounts of income tax. So if you look at our overall tax bill, we shouldn't be raising any taxes at all because we're at record levels of tax.
The poll tax, though, Sean, was indefensible because you had a lord of the manor paying exactly the same amount as someone sweeping the roads. And I mean, that was, let's be blunt, that was Thatcherite philosophy. And she got too cocky and thought she could get away with it.
I won't accept that, because when Thatcher talked about having a poll tax that was focused on the individual, the country rioted. So actually, I won't accept that was fact.
Yeah, but good reason. I don't support riots, but they got angry with good reason. Because it was inherently unfair, grotesquely unfair.
I do accept that this tax is unfair. I do accept that. I do accept, and just to be clear, I'm not arguing for a poll tax, but the point that an individual should pay tax based on their income, that basic principle should be followed.
Okay.
What do you think to that at home? And again, the theme that keeps coming through on my inbox is this whole notion of if you're all using the same services, surely what are people saying is literally the same bill, please. This whole word about politics of envy does seem to be coming through as well, thick and fast. Look, I'll be bringing some more of your thoughts in after the break, but also I want to ask you, the police have come up with a new policy, right? What do you think it is? Do you think it's about law and order, crime busting, or perhaps something else? Multiple choice, there you go. You tell me your answer and I'll see you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Earlier on Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman lays down a devastating piece in The Telegraph this morning, attacking the government's approach to the Rwanda scheme.
High-risk ex-convicts, including violent sexual offenders, murderers and rapists, were managed at the job centre in central Oxford without their restrictions being recorded or observed.
We have sexual offenders, strange rapists, applying for work, applying for training opportunities that still had court order restrictions. We just didn't know.
The whole thing is a mess, and people are now working with individuals who are dangerous and they're unaware of that.
That's disgusting. Actually unbelievable. I've just watched that myself for the first time and I can't believe it.
Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, Friday to Sunday from 6 a.m.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Dewbs and Co. Lots of you getting in touch. I'm going to come on to the police story in just a second, but Judy says, you know, Paul, he just keeps going on about redistribution of wealth all the time. So why don't we just start with him? Why didn't he just start sharing out anything that he's got? He could lead by example. That's a very good point. I'll try and take a tenner off him before we leave. Look, I've sat the pair of them together as well, mainly just in case, you know, if they ever need to earn extra cash, they could perhaps do some catalogue modelling. Look at them. What a handsome pair of specimens they are with their matching jackets. That's the point that Lee was making earlier on. Still, many people getting in touch saying that tax should be... Well, Mark, actually, he says tax should be based on the ability to pay and what you earn, also the amount of people... When you say, Mark, I found that quite interesting, that the tax should be based on the ability to pay. So if you've got loads of money and you put it into, I don't know, like a fixed term savings account, I don't know, so you tie your cash up, so you mint it, you tie it up for 5 years, you can't get access to it. Would you let people off? So they've got the cash, but they can't get access to it? I'm not so sure about that one. Anyway, look, it's Friday. Dewberry Tavern is open, so cheers to all of you. The weekend starts here, so it does. So big cheers. Cheers. Right, let's get down to business, because the police story I want to talk to you about, I was teeing it up. Perhaps they've decided to arrest people that, you know, really disrespect war memorials, or maybe they've woke up and realised, you know what, there's two-tiered policing, maybe that's not such a good idea. No, don't want to burst your bubble, that's not what's happened at all. What has actually happened is that Staffordshire Police have issued a guide, everybody. It's very useful, because it's all about aiming not to offend people with the words that are used. So now we can't say policeman, we can't say man up, because apparently that would even risk breaking the law. I find this... Well, in fact, no, it doesn't matter what I think. You tell me what you think, Paul Embry.
I think sometimes it's sensible if they are not overly heavy-handed about it. So, for example, policemen...
Are you a fireman?
No, I'm a firefighter, and I have no issue...
Whose choice is that?
Well, I mean, it's not a question of choice, it's a question of reality. We've had women in the fire service for 40 years or more. So if we stuck to the language of fireman, it would just be factually incorrect. So
why? Because I would be happy to be called a fireman, because to me, I'm a human, and I'm a fire operator.
That's not what people understand with firemen, and that's why it was changed. You could be a firewoman, and I guess that would be understandable, but we don't use the term firewoman. What we do is we use the term firefighter because it covers all bases. So on things like that, I don't have a particular issue, provided it's implemented without, you know, trying to knock people on the head with a big stick. There are other things we need to worry about more than that sort of thing, which is the erasure of the word woman from
oh, don't get me started on that. 2 seconds before I get onto that.
Sean, and stuff like that.
Tell me your thoughts on this police work.
So I'll tell you where it comes from. It's the proliferation of jobs that say you are the anti-this or you are to promote that. If I said to you, you are to, your job is chief rose distributor, there'd be roses all over your house. So when you say to someone, your job is to make everybody feel comfortable, they start to try to make everybody feel comfortable, and it has repercussions. And let's be clear, every time we use the words firefighter or whatever, you do sort of remove women. I sometimes think, can't you just call a firefighter or a policewoman because it accepts that women do the job? If everybody's a police person, it then sounds like women don't do the job, and that's my.
I mean, I have no issue with that particularly, but in reality, that's not the language that's used. You know, people will still use either policeman or police officer or fireman and firefighter. So the latter of those two are better because they take into account the fact that there are women in the job.
With firefighters, it might be a bit different, but with police, because we use the word police officer, everybody was included anyway. But the more important point is this: if you make every police officer have to worry about the language they're using.
Hang on a minute, we have it.
Oh.
Wow, what's going on?
Can I apologise? I hate to.
There's an invasion. We've got an invasion.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of those in Britain at the moment.
Yeah, Mark Dolan as well. What are you?
I did not come via the channel, but let me just interrupt this great broadcast by saying I heard that the Dewberry Tavern is open, and I quite fancy a drink. But then I suddenly realised that I've got work to do because I'm launching a brand new show called Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. So it's just water for me.
Shocking.
Oh, well,
you're letting the side down, Mark.
Just a bit.
We allow non-alcohol drinking in Dewberry Tavern. We don't discriminate, so you're very welcome.
Cheers.
There's a double vodka in that, really.
Yeah,
that'll do.
Double. It's a big, I think it's probably
Gin.
Yeah. So tell us anyway. So you're doing what?
Really exciting show. We've got my big opinion, but it's a Friday special. It's pretty outrageous. There's a few gags in there as well. Should the Tories ditch Rishi Sunak and call a snap election with the new leader? Plus, does Nigel Farage going into the jungle pave the way for our brilliant presenter and friend becoming Prime Minister of this country?
Right, I've got about a minute left, so go on then. Show us your comedy genius. Give us a joke.
OK, my wife and I do role-playing. OK?
Right.
She's got a naughty nurse's outfit. I dress up as her ex-boyfriend, Steve.
Right.
We passed 9 o'clock.
I do.
Gonna get in trouble at home for that, by the way.
Double vodka, didn't I?
Get that this is a tea time show. I didn't get that joke whatsoever, mainly because as soon as you opened your mouth and started telling it, I was cringing. So I think I was there thinking, oh gosh, please don't say
thought it was
anything.
a therapy session.
Anyway,
that's obviously.
Look, that's Mark Dolan. I'll have a word with him about his role playing in a minute. I think he needs some support and perhaps a shoulder to cry on. So I'll sort that out in a second. But in the meantime, Sean, you'd be very pleased to know, or perhaps not, the overwhelming opinion from the people at home is that you, my friend, can come again. If indeed you would like to. Paul Embry, lots of love for you always. You guys at home, I would like you to say thank you for your company tonight. We very much enjoyed it. Don't worry, I'll have a word with Mark about his jokes. He'll up his game before 8 o'clock. He's looking forward to seeing you. In the meantime, have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Stay out of trouble, stay safe, and I will be back on Monday, actually. Lee Anderson is up next with his programme, Real World. We love that. Will you be watching it, Sean?
Absolutely.
Good. See you on Monday. Night.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.